A very good afternoon to all the participants. I appreciate your time. So in today's topic, before I go through this presentation, when you say jump starting CMMI in your organization, this is a common question faced by many. People know about CMMI, people know about the people who are dealing with CMMI, but somehow the question is how, where, and when do I start? There are also organizations which initially want to implement or initially want to improve some of their existing processes by not having any professional implementation, but rather a quick step to at least follow the best practices. This presentation will attempt to answer some of those questions and concerns. My name is Himanshu Karkhanis, and again thanks to Mr. Veer for these introductions. At any point of time, if you have any questions, do write it on the chat box which is visible on the left hand side. Some words of caution before we begin this presentation. We usually hear the words saying, implementation of CMMI, or I want to implement CMMI. CMMI cannot be implemented because it is not an additional factor. It is not anything new that you need to create. CMMI is based on your existing way of working. It is not a standard like you have ISO standards. It is a guidance model. So there is no question of implementation. There can only be an alignment or improvement. Secondly, you cannot implement CMMI with a single jump. So excuse me, I mean the topic is jumpstart, but that should not be taken literally. It doesn't mean it can be achieved in a single leap. There are certain steps that you need to undertake. I also at this point of time welcome the other participants who are joining in. We have just kind of started. The third point is we are not going to talk about how to quickly get you a CMMI certification. That is another word which is wrong. CMMI does not provide any certification. It only authorizes the CMMI partner to conduct appraisal on its behalf. A certification is assigned or provided only as a note or an official record of a successful appraisal. So this presentation will not tell you to do 10 steps and then at the 11th step you receive a kind of rating, but it will definitely put you towards the path of an appraisal. Finally, we have all heard the proverb, there are no shortcuts to success, and the same holds for CMMI too. But there are some good news too. After the caution, there are some really valuable and practical tips that are available on the social media or internet. For example, there are many case studies available by organizations who have successfully reaped the benefit of CMMI. There are experiences shared by organizations who have adhered to the CMMI. There are some white papers available on the CMMI Institute itself. And finally, the good old books of CMMI. I think you can see the images of these three books. These are the constellations of CMMI. CMMI for development, CMMI for services, and CMMI for acquisition. These are available the PDF in PDF form free from the CMMI Institute website. Usually what happens is people forget the main source of information and look outwards as to how can they find some shortcuts. But I have deliberately provided this image of the CMMI constellations because many of the good inputs can be received, can be obtained from these sources. So my suggestion is to start off by reading and studying this model information. So let's take the jump now. There are some questions when you deal with this activity of jump starting CMMI in your organizations. For example, the typical questions that I would like to ask when I visit any organization is, what do you want to improve? And also why? Because unless there is a focus or a target of certain areas on which you want to work, there is no benefit of merely adhering to any model or standard. Remember, every such model or standard exists for a purpose of improving in the areas that you are focusing on. What are the pain areas? What are the issues that are faced by you? Is something not working to its full potential? Do you have processes in place but they don't seem to work? Do you have a question of how to set processes in the first place? Do you want to be sure whether a process that you have established will work or not? What are the business requirements? Or are there any business requirements for dealing with or knowing about CMMI? These are the questions that one needs to ask before moving over to the next steps of adoration of CMMI. The first step starts with looking within. So when I say looking within, you have to look inside your organization because many of your answers are hidden in the way you are doing your work, let's say today. For example, are there any policies? A policy is, well, not exactly a rule, but something that your top management wants you to do. For example, every organization has leave policies and we want everyone to adhere to them. Are these policies established, meaning documented, so that everyone can access them? And does everyone know about them? Most importantly, the spread of knowledge about existing policies is important because a person who has recently joined your organization might not be aware of these policies. However, in this context of our topic, the policies that I am talking about are not related to only your HR policies. These are the policies of your work. Remember, there are three constellations in CMMI for the software development industries, for the service industries, and or for industries who are into the acquisition mode. Regardless of the work that you perform, regardless of whether you're in the IT industry or the service industry, there has to be policies about your nature of work. Further, does everyone plan and monitor their work? Is there a plan to what you want to do? Do you have your service managers or project managers with some kind of plan for the week? Is that plan adhered to? Is that plan being monitored? And the question that you can see below it, and are those plans established? You will keep seeing this word established, and this is a very important word when you talk about CMMI. Establish means I initially document or at least record it on some tool. Some organizations use SharePoint. Your policies and plans can be stored over there. That is called an establishing. Then comes maintaining. So maintain means that you revise and update those plans and those policies as necessary. Next, do you have a mechanism or some system for configuration management? I'm sure this concept of configuration management is quite old. It comes even before the existence or creation of CMMI as a model that we know today. Configuration management is a universal concept. And again, as I said and I repeat, CMMI is not an alien science. It is based on the existing best practices, some of which could be found even in your organization. If you are keeping track of documents, for example, and maintaining their proper versions with information on what has changed, there is an element of configuration management that is being followed. This configuration management is extremely essential regardless of whether you want to, in quotes, implement CMMI or not, because configuration management helps to maintain the integrity of data and information. Does anyone identify, analyze, and work on the risks and issues? I'm sure we all have heard a lot about risks and issues. But, well, do you know the difference between the two? Risk is a problem typically that may happen, which has a probability of occurring, while an issue is a problem that has happened. Surprisingly, many organizations or the people working in those organizations confuse between the two and then they don't know what to do next. What they create at the end is loads and loads of documentation. Let us avoid this. You need to identify and differentiate between risks and issues, and you need to plan on how to deal with each one of them separately. You could have risks at the organization level. You could have risks at your service or project level. Similarly, there could be issues that impact the whole organization, while there are issues that impact only a particular service or work or project delivery. Further, do you maintain records of requirement information from the customer? This is a very important phase. Even if you are following an agile methodology, this becomes all the more important to record specific details of customer requirements. I know that there are people who might say isn't that obvious? I mean, we know what to do. We know what to develop. But do you really know? Do you know what the customer requested 1 year back? There are long-term projects sometimes. And when the customer gets back to us saying, hey, this is not what I requested, it is then and only then that we go back to our assumptions that we did record the information. It is a question of how to record the requirement information rather than how much. We again see the word maintain, and I have highlighted it by the way. So it means write and update. The information has to get revised. Do you know what has changed and what has not changed? Which again takes us back to the configuration management. Do we keep track of the requirement changes? And is everyone aware? Or are there just few heroes in the team who know about those requirement changes while your testers and your designers are totally unaware? These are the kind of cultural changes that CMMI requires. Next, do you measure anything? The example that I've given is, the number of steps required to reach the nearest coffee machine. Because I remember that in some of my first jobs, I would really have a look at how far is the coffee machine. That's the kind of only thing that I would measure. Well, if the coffee machine is near, it will impact your work. And when it is far, well, it will still impact your work. So you need to measure whether the work that you are doing is causing any benefit or not. What is the average time taken for you to deliver a product? What is the average number of defects that you see in a typical module? How many times has the service delivery failed and why? How much time does it require for a dysfunctional service to get repaired and up and running? There are a countless number of measures that you can use. The question is why? Why do you want to measure and for what? These measures have to be established, again, established and maintained. Do you have any documented procedures on standards? I know typically if I enter an organization, people would be too happy to explain to me a long process of how they perform the development, how they conduct the testing. But call somebody else and you see version number 2. Why is that? When you're working in the same organization, you need to have some well-defined and well-established procedures or standards. There are many development standards available, for example, and there is a reason why they are documented. They are documented so that whether it is you who are working in your organization somewhere in Australia, the standards are the same. We have all heard about A4 standard, right? So the size of A4 is same in India as well as in the rest of the world. I don't need to describe the dimensions. This should be the culture when it comes to your service delivery, project management, product delivery, software development, or acquisition. You should have some documented and revised procedures. Also, they should be relevant to the work that you are doing. Finally, is there anyone who conducts a check on these 8 questions that we discussed? Performing some activities is one thing, but you need to have a team, or rather an expert team, who knows what are the expected steps, what are the expected norms in your organization. They are aware of the existing procedures, standards, and guidelines. They are aware of different projects or work that is undertaken in your organization. And they are typically the people who are experienced in dealing with different natures of projects. These are the people who will have weapons of checkpoints, or as is typically called, a checklist. Regardless of what you have, there should be people who are supposed to check if those documented procedures and standards are being followed diligently by people or not. And there should be a measure of that too. For example, out of 10 projects, they might see only 8 have somewhat implemented the relevant standards and procedures, while the other 2 have deviated from it. Are they capturing the reasons for this deviation? Is there a communication between the owners of that project or product or service? Are the people in your organization aware of what are the rules, policies, and procedures? Is there someone who can communicate these things to them? These are very important questions. These checks have to be conducted periodically on the existing processes, work, or development. The results of this check should also be recorded and they should be studied at various intervals. This is like doing your blood test, let's say every month, to check if you have maintained the levels of hemoglobin. If not, then well, you need to take some steps. You need to eat certain foods. An organization's process health is as much important as your health because that will ultimately define the quality of work output. Because remember, when we try to jumpstart something like a CMMI, we should not forget to know and understand whether you really know what you are going to achieve by jumpstarting CMMI. Why do you need CMMI? Which is why we asked in the first place, what are the things that you would like to improve? So this check that we are talking about will directly give you a report on whether the things you wanted to improve are really improving or not. Now, time to look straight. So you looked within your organization, you did a checkpoint on some of the points that we mentioned. So what were your answers? Objectively speaking, your answers could be either yes or no to some of these questions. If your answer was yes to either all the questions or mostly to all the questions, you're already on the CMMI path, which is good. There should be then an as is or should be comparison done by some CMMI professionals. This could be either the members of your organization who have been trained on this model, or they could be people who have been called or requested to come and check your existing processes. You must now take the professional guidance from CMMI partners who are authorized to do and conduct and assess the level of CMMI activities in your organization. They are the ones who will always give you the correct guidance. You have to continue and enhance the steps that you have already taken by studying the model. The model provides some really valuable insights on how part. You have to train the relevant people on the model and how to use it. For example, we spoke about people who are going to check if the procedures are being followed or not. These are the people who should be the first ones to get trained. If your answer is no to mostly all the questions or to all of them, then the first thing that you need to do is to get and make or form a team of the most experienced and technical people. This team will actually analyze. I'm sure we all have heard about the root cause analysis. So this is the team that will actually analyze what is wrong. Do we really have a goal in mind? Is CMMI the goal? Do we understand that CMMI is a model for process improvement and not for process implementation? This team will actually work on setting up some rules and guidelines for your primary work. They will establish certain regulations, which you can call as procedures, standards, or guidelines. This team will then focus on some of these 8 questions or also add some more as you progress, because remember, I selected these 8 questions only as a jump start. These are in no means the only things that you should do. This is not an exhaustive list. And neither does doing all these 8 things mean that you are at a certain level of CMMI. However, if you are doing this, it means that there is some activity going on in your organization. Finally, as in the case of the yes part, Even for the no part, you need to take some professional guidance from CMMI partners and professionals. Also, there are some typical roles and responsibilities which are required in the organization. A word of caution is that these are not to be confused with the official designations, and you don't need to hire people separately or specially for these areas. That is why I have written here roles. For example, there will be some senior management and a sponsor who will be a person to provide sponsorship with respect to time and money for CMMI activities. There should be a person who is heading the quality, be it the product quality and the process quality. There should be an internal audit team. This is the team that we mentioned who will do the check for some of these areas. Then there could be a team of experienced people called as the engineering process group or the service process group who would establish the procedures and policies for your organization. Trainings are very essential. So there will be people or there should be people to undertake and coordinate the relevant trainings. Remember, your project managers are also the very crucial resources because those are the ones from whom you will receive the project informations. Then there could be some consultants who have a prior experience of CMMI and they could be called in to jumpstart some of your work. They could act as part of your organizations on a temporary basis or they could work on a contract basis. Regardless of that, there should always be also a single point of contact or SPOC. This makes the communication as a focused entity and it helps to streamline your communication with respect to CMMI activities. Then we have something called as appraisal team members or ATMs. This is a group of people who will work with the lead appraiser in case your organization decides to go for an appraisal. These are the members who are selected by the lead appraiser as per the criteria set by CMMI Institute. And finally, you will have a lead appraiser, which is put in brackets because our focus of today's discussion is process improvement and not appraisal. These roles and responsibilities have to be really identified in your existing organization. Some typical questions that come are, what if my organization is very small? What if we have 12 people? Well, again, as I'm saying, these are not the different people that you will need. These are the roles and responsibilities that are essential regardless of the size of your organization.